difficult thing when designing a car from scratch is making choices. Now, for designing a car and designing the right proportions, the tire is very important. Because the ratio between the size of the tire and the overall height of the vehicle, depending on what type of vehicle you want to build, that ratio is very important. Now, for my car I want to have sportive models with a sportive setup. That means that I want to have a ratio of maximum 1 to 2. So that means that the tire is half the height of the vehicle. So if the vehicle is 1.2 meter high, I want to have a tire of at least 600 millimeters. That would be perfect. With the new seating arrangement, I saw that I could go much lower than 1.2 meter because my target was 1.15 meters, so just below 1.2 meter high. And with the new seating arrangement, I could drop down to almost a meter high. That meant I could go back to the original tire that I selected. And the original tire has a diameter of 570 millimeters and is 135/70/15. This is a very narrow tire, which is good for the aerodynamics, and it has a decent size rim. Of course, it will be very difficult to have aftermarket rims, but I don't really care at this point in time. I need to have a cheap starting point. Looking at other rim sizes and wheel sizes and tire sizes, they all come back to that 570 diameter wheel. So I can run a 15 inch rim with a very narrow tire, or a 16 with a little bit wider tire, or a 17 with a little bit wider tire, or even an 18 inch wheel with a little bit wider tire. Again, for me, this wheel combo allows me comfort, but also is cost effective. It's also heavier, but for me now at this point in time, cost is also a very important point. Something I mentioned a little bit ago in one of my previous movies regarding this. Saving weight is very important on an ultralight build, however, against what cost? And I mentioned back then that we had this Wilwood brake system that was at least 3 times lighter, but it was also at least 3 times more expensive. And that's the thing that you often will find. The same with body panels. You can go for carbon fiber, or you can go for plastic or fiberglass. But yeah, the price difference is tremendous. So these are all choices that we need to make when we are doing this. And making choices is very difficult, especially when it comes to a battery pack, for example. Most people that make YouTube channels here and that make content, they will have a car and they will buy a part that they can bolt on. This project is not anywhere like that. You need to source between different models and between different brands to get what you want. For example, I found a caliper and a disc that I wanted to use. However, for that PCD, I couldn't find any rim in 15 inch that would support the tire. I would either go with a tire that was or with a rim that was way too wide for the tire, or I had to switch to a wider tire altogether. Again, something I didn't want. So I went to look what other rims there were available, and then I found that Volkswagen, or at least the 4x100 PCD, is used for very narrow tires in 15 inch, 4.5 inch wide, 5 inch wide, 5.5 inch wide, 6 inch wide, 6.5 inch wide. It's all readily available. So then I decided to switch to 4x100 PCD. Then I had the tire, I had the rim, but now I had to find a new hub and a new disc brake and a new caliper, perhaps. Then I found from a readily available model a hub for the rear axle, which I could use for the front axle, because I have a rear wheel drive and most cars in Europe are front wheel drive. So the axle or the hub of the rear I could use in the front. So I was working on that, but then I didn't have a brake system, so I thought I'd use that brake system. But then you get into the modern day discs, which are 20 mil thick, and the disc that I had was 10 mil thick. So then you can maybe switch to a rear disc, but then the diameter is too small, and then you cannot find the front caliper with it. So in the end, after a lot of going back and forth, I decided to stay with the brake caliper of the Peugeot that I had, and stay with the design of that caliper, and either re-drill it to 4x100 myself, or go for a 2-piece rotor, brake rotor. But then I found myself having a little bit of an issue. The rear hub assembly that I really want to use has a very big flange. Normally on the front the flange is kept very small for the hub, and the bolts will just barely fit into the hub to mount the wheel onto, and then the disc for the disc brake system will barely slip over it, so it's a very tight fit. But now using a hub from the rear axle, which is much bigger, my front disc brake didn't fit anymore. So I had to look for a different disc brake, and that's how I came back to the Peugeot disc brake, because it's for a bigger PCD, so it was also a little bit bigger in itself. However, if I'm going to customize something, I can better design it from scratch myself. So what I ended up with, after a lot of going back and forth, is using the tire that I knew, using a 4x100 4.5 inch wide 15 inch wheel, then go for the hub that I found, which is a full assembled part with the option to run ABS, and yeah, designing my own disc brake, designing my own hub carrier, and of course my own suspension, etc., etc. So that's you start with one thing and then everything changes again, and that's what makes this extremely difficult. And it's extremely difficult to focus and to find something and to stick with it and to say, okay, this is final. But I think at this point in time that I've made a lot of things which are the basic foundation for this project. I have finalized them, I think, quite well, and now we can really start to redesign everything and start developing the chassis more, and etc., etc. So I hope this creates some understanding for what I'm doing and why it's difficult and why it's taken a long time. And yeah, I hope that you enjoy the content of today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.
Ain't seen nothing yet.